Hello, Mississippi and abroad, and welcome to another edition, the holiday edition, the Thanksgiving edition of Justify Your Existence, a Daily Journal podcast. I am Parrish Alford, college sports editor and columnist, not communist. I am joined by our beat writer, Stefan Krajisnik of Mississippi State and Michael Katz of Ole Miss. You guys hear them every week, and we're excited. It's been a great year, guys. It's gone by fast. It seems like not that long ago that I had to get up early for these Zoom interviews, man, out on the West Coast. Well, for one of y'all, I forget who that was. I think it was you, Michael. I was out in Arizona during the Zoom interview that we had, and now football season is just, it's just flown by. I guess it seems like that for me. Has it flown by for y'all this first season?
Yeah, I mean, it feels like I just moved in. It's crazy. As I was leaving Vaught Hemingway yesterday, I was like, I swear I was just walking in here for the first time. And now that's the last time I'm going to be in there for a while. It's crazy how fast it's gone by. It really is. I'm sure Stefan probably feels the same way. Though he gets one more. He gets one more at home.
Yeah, no, it has been crazy. I know, for me, this was my first time out of college, like on a full-time beat. And I was thinking about it the other day after that Tennessee State game. I was like, this really flew by because I don't think I had, from moving in to fall camp starting to the season starting, like I never had a moment to like process, everything that was going on. And maybe a slower game against Tennessee State kind of let me do that. But it's crazy how fast it's all gone. And, we're only a couple games away from the football season being complete.
Well, and Michael, you talk about walking out of Vaught Hemingway Stadium for the last time, and it's like really the last time, isn't it? Is it after this season that they blow up everything and start over?
I think that's the plan. I believe it starts in January is when the facelift begins.
Yeah. Well, I mentioned to Keith Carter, I tagged him on Twitter, man. I think the model for all press box moves, as Ole Miss is getting ready to do, should be Alabama's. Not Auburn's, which is just kind of like, as I've told some people before, it's like the Liberty Bowl press box with clean carpet. There's just nothing good about the Auburn press box. Both of you guys saw it this year. So anyway, I'm hoping that Keith takes that into consideration. There's a way you can do this. You can sell that prime real estate where traditional press boxes, have been. You can sell that real estate, which I know he's trying to do, and you can still provide a work environment for working media. Auburn gave up, didn't want to do that, didn't even try, and Alabama was able to find that middle ground. Maybe Ole Miss will as well. Well, look, let's start with Stefan. Tell me, man, you talk about the season going by fast and how everything just kind of flew by, but tell me about rivalry games in the past. Now, as Egg Bowl week is here, what have you covered? What have you been a part of? How do you think that compares to what you might experience Thursday night?
Yeah, well, I think in terms of football, this will definitely be the best rivalry that I've kind of gotten the chance to see in person and between some college teams. With Indiana and Purdue, so much of that rivalry is built on basketball and hasn't really been much of a rivalry recently with Purdue dominating. But it has been that's kind of the focus in Indiana is, the state of basketball. And that's what everyone stresses about most, though I've covered some good Indiana Purdue football games, and it can be pretty intense, especially, when it's two programs that, oftentimes that last game is the game that determines who's going to a bowl and who's not. I think there was a 2 or 3 year stretch where both teams had five wins going into that game. So I've seen kind of the Indiana Purdue rivalry. Growing up, near the Chicago area, White Sox fan, I got to see the Cubs White Sox rivalry, which is a pretty fun one, in the grand scheme of a 162 game baseball season. You're kind of looking for a couple series that really stand out and get the fans going. And that's definitely, the crosstown rivalry will do that. But from afar, I've always had great respect for the Egg Bowl. The most memorable thing in my mind from watching the Egg Bowl from afar, and I'm sure Parrish, even you, after watching, however many Egg Bowls you have, you probably agree that the Elijah Moore dog peeing celebration is what stands out. That's kind of what stands out to me. I know, you guys know I've been close friends with Ben Portnoy for a while, who covered Mississippi State for the Dispatch. And I remember him texting me being like, if you're not watching Egg Bowl, like you need to see what just happened. I already was watching, and I was like, I cannot believe you are covering this right now, because this is the most absurd thing I've ever seen. But Michael and I have talked about it all week. Like we talked about it all season. We have no idea what's going to happen on Thursday, but we know something stupid is going to happen, or something crazy is going to happen. And that's what you want for rivalry week. And I think it's cool. I'm sure there's people on both sides that don't like this game being on a Thursday, and it shortens your week, and maybe it takes away a little bit of that preparation. But it's really cool that this kind of gets that prime time Thanksgiving slot. Obviously, it'll be competing with whatever NFL game is on at that point. But it's going to draw some attention, and it's cool, in terms of recruiting and all that. What this rivalry, being in prime time means.
You mentioned the Elijah Moore urination celebration there. I was down on the sideline, on the Ole Miss sideline by that point. And what I really remember about that is, I knew the 15-yard penalty was coming. I knew that Luke Logan was probably not going to make it. I mean, he's an outstanding young man, just, struggled as a kicker at the college level, and he pushed it right. Okay, so that much, I kind of thought that it might go that way. But what happened immediately after the touchdown, and I'm even forgetting who scored it right now. It might have been, obviously Elijah Moore. It's Elijah Moore, okay, on a pass. But there was that long pass to Braylon Sanders that set it up and really helped Ole Miss get down the field with Matt Corral, who did not start the game. It seems like ages ago that Matt Corral was the, quote, passing quarterback in the running offense. Seems like ages ago. But he helped Ole Miss down the field quickly. Long pass to Braylon Sanders. Both of those guys will play again Thursday night. Then there's the touchdown. And I'm down on that sideline, and I remember Keith Carter, the Ole Miss AD, recently named full-time AD at that point. He had been the interim. Immediately, hands in the air, and he gives up the two. Like, we need to go for two. We need to go, like Keith Carter is ready to go for two and win the game. It's a moot point when you have the penalty and you get moved back. But the decision was already made. Matt Luke had already decided he was not going to go for two. He was going to kick the extra point and play for overtime. But I thought that showed a difference in philosophy at that time. I mean, Matt was going to be conservative, felt like he had the momentum. Keith Carter was ready to end it right there. He put up that two, looked like Winston Churchill, the V for victory, man. Those two fingers shot up in the air. He was ready to go for two. Michael, tell me about some rivalry games, man. I'm intrigued when we talk about your group of five experience in the past. Some people in these parts think it's SEC or nothing. It's the big boys or nothing. There is good football that is played at other levels. And when I see that you spent time at Boise and then at Wyoming, not that I think Wyoming is like the class of group of five as it comes to football, but that just interests me because I always go back to that 2004 trip that I took with Ole Miss out there, spent a little time in that area, and came to understand and realize, I think, the Colorado State and Wyoming rivalry and how close those schools really are. What are some things you've seen in the past?
So I grew up with SC-UCLA,
Yeah.
and I got to cover that once as a student reporter. It was Lane Kiffin's last full season at SC. It was the year they were preseason number one and finished 7-6, and it was the disaster. It was the end of the disaster season. So it was cool for me because I was at the Rose Bowl and I got to cover a game in the Rose Bowl, which was always kind of like a dream of mine. So that was kind of my first big rivalry game covering experience. Then when I got to Boise, I would say the biggest rivalry that I covered there was against BYU. That's a pretty big rivalry, not super fond of one another. And the game I covered was in Provo. And there was like a string of like 3 straight games where BYU won on Hail Marys. I don't remember what year. It was like 2015, I think it was. They had a quarterback. Taysom Hill was hurt. And it was Tanner Mangum was his name. And one of the Hail Marys was the Boise State game. It was just an absolutely bizarre experience to be at that one. And then, for Wyoming, Boise State's a pretty big rival. Like last year they played in a blizzard, which was certainly an experience for someone from Southern California who now lives in Mississippi. It was kind of I do not miss that.
I walked out today in a sweatshirt and a vest on and everything, and then I realized it was 70 degrees. I was like, this is not what I'm used
to. And then Wyoming, Colorado State, like you said, is it's the border war. I didn't realize how close they are, but it's literally like less than an hour between Fort Collins and Laramie, and those schools really hate each other. It's hilarious, and it's fun to be a part of. The first one I covered, it was so cold that like the field was frozen. And we were all like sliding around, and like it was really bad. I did not wear thick enough socks on that specific day. And then last year's was probably the weirdest thing ever. It was in an empty stadium because of all the COVID stuff. So covering a huge rivalry game in an empty stadium was something else. A lot of really cool, just a lot of really cool memories. And as somebody, like Stefan said, like my Egg Bowl memory is, of course, Elijah Moore. I remember where I was. I was at a friend's house for Thanksgiving. Wyoming was going to play Colorado State out in Colorado Springs, and I was in Denver, and we were watching the game, and it was on, and we all kind of got around the TV, and we were just like, wait, what? Did you just see what happened? And we all just huddled around. It was one of the most unbelievable things I think any of us had ever seen. So Stefan and I joke a lot that we're expecting a very normal game. Nothing weird is going to happen. It's going to be just very, very easy to write about.
Well, the Elijah Moore thing, really, I mean, there have been so many odd things like that have happened in this series. There have been, numerous fights. Of course, Matt Corral was a part of one in 2019. But then the big one really was 1997. Now, these things y'all need to look up on YouTube, the 1997 Egg Bowl fight, and go back and find the 1983 wind-blown field goal. Okay, State's lining up to kick the field goal. I don't know if y'all have heard about this, if people around you have mentioned it. They kick the field goal. They're going to win the game. And in the process, they're going to give Ole Miss a losing season and make them not bowl eligible. Okay, kick the field goal. It's online, and it gets right there. And this huge gust of wind just comes, man. And you can see the football doing this, and then it just falls, and Ole Miss wins. Ole Miss goes to the Independence Bowl. Find that on YouTube. It is fascinating. So we'll see. Hopefully, for the sake of deadline, we don't have any extra stuff like that Thursday night. Tell me, what are you guys hearing about bowl destinations for your teams? Stefan, start us off.
Yeah. Well, I think this Egg Bowl has a really big, role in how the bowl games are going to be determined, because I think, whatever happens with Alabama in the playoff, this game has Sugar Bowl implications for Ole Miss, and if you kind of go down the line there, it could have Citrus Bowl implications for both teams depending on where A&M ends up, and it's going to be really interesting to see how the bowl destinations end up because of how the rankings end up. Because I know right now, Mississippi State, Ole Miss and Texas A&M are both ahead of Mississippi State in the college football playoff rankings. How does that change if Mississippi State has a win against both those teams? It's interesting. Where does the team that finishes second in the SEC West finish in the rankings? So there's definitely some Citrus Bowl and Sugar Bowl conversations being had. It's looking like the most safe bet is Liberty Bowl or Music City Bowl. For Mississippi State, those would be, one of those two would be what I guess. There's been some conversation about the Texas Bowl simply because Mississippi State's never been to it before. But I think that we're just, with the bowl games getting fans back and everything that happened with the bowl games last year, having a team like Mississippi State in Nashville or Memphis is definitely appealing to the Liberty Bowl, the Music City Bowl. Those two would be the main ones I would kind of have on the radar. Though I would say that if Mississippi State wins the Egg Bowl, I think something like the Citrus Bowl ends up being a real conversation. I don't know if a win would be enough to boost Mississippi State over Texas A&M, even with that win over Texas A&M, just because of where the rankings are right now. But if you really want to get ambitious as a Mississippi State guy, you look at Alabama and Georgia. If they were to get into the playoff and Ole Miss or Mississippi State having wins against Ole Miss and Texas A&M, that Sugar Bowl possibility does still loom, and that's of course assuming Texas A&M wins at LSU.
Yeah, Michael, what happens? Let's say Ole Miss does not win the game. What happens to a 9-3 Ole Miss team? I'm assuming that takes them out of Access Bowl possibilities.
That's kind of where I think what would happen, though. I do believe a 9-3 Ole Miss team is still pretty appetizing for a bowl committee and all that kind of stuff, but I really think at this point the only way you guarantee it is going 10-2 in the regular season. It's one of those things where it's so close, and I think everybody who's around the program, the fans, can all kind of they're getting really, really excited, but they've been hurt before, and the Egg Bowl is where a lot of these dreams can kind of end. And all the projections, right now is assuming Ole Miss wins this game, and it's the Sugar Bowl for the most part. Today I saw it was Oklahoma State, I believe, was their opponent. I've seen Oklahoma in there too. I've seen Peach Bowl, I've seen Fiesta Bowl against Notre Dame, but Sugar Bowl really seems to kind of be the big one. And but I think a 9-3 Ole Miss team could get a New Year's Six bid, maybe, but it's gonna be a lot harder, because the last couple times they got in, they were 3-loss teams, correct?
Yes.
And 14 and 15, I think they were somewhere around 3 or 4.
Yeah, they were 3 and 14 for sure. I think maybe in 15 they had lost to Memphis, Arkansas, and Florida.
Yeah, so
3-loss teams both of those years.
Yeah, so it's definitely not impossible, but so much of it depends on what happens around them, and I think style points matter too. If they get blown out by Mississippi State, I think that's really going to hurt. But if they lose a heartbreaker, one of those weird ones, I don't know how much that's going to be held against them. But at this point, the one I've been hearing most is Sugar Bowl, but so much can change depending on what happens Thursday.
Well, I will tell you, I would rank the hospitality rooms as Peach Bowl number 1, Sugar Bowl number 2. Strong number 2, okay? Strong number 2 with the hospitality room, but number 1 would be the Peach Bowl in that regard. How healthy are these teams? I realize you ask the coaches, that's like trying to get the nuclear launch codes. They don't want to talk about it, but what can y'all make out about who played and who looked gimpy? How healthy are the Bulldogs, Stefan?
Yeah, they had a decent amount of guys sitting out that game against Tennessee State, and I think a lot of that might have just been to play it safe. Fred Peters has battled some injury this year, and he did, he missed some games, came back for some games, and was out against Tennessee State. I think that might have been a little bit more precautionary. Brandon Ruiz was not available in that Tennessee State game. I think that might have been more about the kicking situation. I wouldn't plan on Brandon Ruiz playing in the Egg Bowl, regardless of health. Tulu Griffin, we haven't seen in a few weeks. It's kind of unclear what the situation is with him. Obviously, he's a big piece in the kick return game, along with, if you can get him the ball on offense. And then Ra Thomas and Christian Ford, they both went down in that Auburn game at wide receiver. I feel like there's a little bit of concern with the both of them, and if they can play, Ra Thomas was a guy that before that game at Auburn was really starting to shine, had 4 touchdowns in 3 games. I know Parrish, you wrote about that a little bit. The one thing for Mississippi State is if there's one position group where they can kind of afford a few guys to go down, it feels like it's wide receiver because of the depth that they do have. I mean, the role that Ra Thomas has played, it's kind of crazy to think, he's just a freshman, and you see Malik Heath kind of stepping up, in the time that Ra's been out. They have options at wide receiver if some of those guys were to be out. On defense, it's really just Fred Peters. Everything aside from that, health-wise is pretty good. Will Rogers had that shoulder issue after that Alabama game. That's all look at his numbers. I don't think the shoulder's really been a problem for him since that game. So, injury wise, it's kind of like Mississippi State would like to have the depth with some of their players and especially a wide receiver, but in terms of, the big guys being out, there's not too much concern.
Michael, we saw Jonathan Mingo. You did. I was driving back from Jackson. Jonathan Mingo back in the game. Dontario Drummond back in the game for a second straight week for Ole Miss. The band's back together. Did they look a little rusty against Vanderbilt? I mean, nothing seemed, just listening, they couldn't get Vanderbilt off the field. It's kind of hard to judge the Ole Miss offense, I thought. But what did you think of Mingo and Drummond?
Yeah, I think Mingo caught, I think it was one pass. I think it was just more just seeing him on the field was kind of a boost for everybody. Obviously Drummond being back is huge, but just to have that trio, but you kind of wonder, like, what's the point of playing Mingo against Vanderbilt? But then with the way the game went, they kind of had to as it went. But I think it was good to kind of get him back into game shape a little bit before the Egg Bowl. But I've always kind of been of the mindset that I think this team might be a little bit healthier than is being let on, just in terms of, maybe, I don't want to say the injury is not as bad, but I think Matt is getting a lot healthier. He's moving around pretty well. He's taking off again. He's sliding, which again I think is probably weird for both of us to kind of see, because he was not sliding earlier in the season, but he's looking healthy. The receivers are looking good. The defense has stayed mostly healthy this season, so I think all things considered, obviously Ben Brown, you're not getting him back. That's not going to get any easier, but I think all things considered, given how late in the season it is, they're getting guys back rather than losing them now. So it's, it wasn't pretty yesterday. The offense just, I think they were a combined 1 for 9 on 3rd and 4th downs. Just, I don't know. It just didn't look quite right. And, it was odd, but that's kind of been what the last few weeks have kind of looked like at times. Really since LSU, there's been moments where it looked really good, and then some moments where it just kind of disappeared, and it was kind of the way it looked yesterday. But I think that if it's going to be put together this week, having all of the pieces together is probably going to help that. But the question is, what's been the issue? This offense was averaging 40 points a game for a while, and now they played one of the worst defenses in the country, and they barely put up 31.
Well, here was what I observed as a listener coming back up. I'd been at the Soul Bowl. That was a lot of fun. Jackson State and Alcorn. Coming back up, they couldn't get the ball, couldn't get Vanderbilt off the field. Clearly, that was Vanderbilt's plan, keep that explosive offense on the side, and they did that. And I think because they were on the side, I'm guessing when they came back without continuity, and one bad pass on 2nd down sets up a 3rd and long, and that kind of thing. And they had a 3 and out quickly in the second half, gave the ball back to Vanderbilt again, couldn't get them off the field. So it's interesting. I can understand Vanderbilt putting in an option that you haven't seen, and maybe you have trouble with that for a little while. You've got to be able, you've got to be able to adjust in the game to that. Steph, I want to know what you think about State's defense, particularly the run defense. Take Tennessee State out of the equation here, and let's go back. And for 6 quarters, they kind of vanished. Arkansas over 200 yards on the ground. Auburn was running well on them early. Obviously, they put it together in the second half. Everything, offense, defense, special teams in the second half at Auburn. How do you feel about State defensively going into this game?
Yeah, it's been surprising that shift in their run defense, those couple games, or I guess maybe those 6 quarters, just because that's not what the Mississippi State defense has been. Where Mississippi State's defense has thrived is making you a one-dimensional team. They forced someone like NC State, a team that loves to run the ball, into being a pass-heavy team, and you got to imagine that's going to be the goal against an Ole Miss team that runs the ball like this Ole Miss team does. And it's going to be interesting to see. It all comes down to the battle up front. I know that's what, that sounds very coach speak, is to say, it's a game, it's a battle of the trenches. It's about the guys that come in, first and leave last. That's what it comes down to. But that's really what it is for this Mississippi State run defense is, what the guys up front, the Jaden Crumedy, Nathan Pickering, Randy Charlton, what those guys up front can do really sets the tone for the rest of the defense, because there are holes in the secondary. And once you have to draw the secondary in a little bit to help with the run defense, now you got some problems. And it comes down to the linebackers too. And I think Tyrus Sweet is kind of just becoming the focal point of what this Mississippi State defense is. I mean, he's all over the place, whether it's getting sacks or tackles for loss. He's clearly an athletic freak that's just making plays happen. And you got to be, the guys in front of him got to do the job to set him up and give him opportunities to kind of break through and be that last line to shut down a run game. They couldn't do that, and they had some poor tackling against Arkansas, but I think Arkansas's offensive line just created some holes that other teams haven't been able to create against Mississippi State. It's going to be really important for those guys in the middle up front, the Jaden Crumedys and the Nathan Pickering, the Cam Youngs, to set the tone, because otherwise Mississippi State's in a load of trouble defensively.
Hey, let's talk about those trenches from the other direction. Michael, it seems to me most of the time, I know Ole Miss has moved Sam Williams around, but it seems like most of the time they have lined him up on their right defensive side, which would match him against Charles Cross on the left offensive side for Mississippi State. You think they move Sam Williams around? I'm sure at some point we're going to see Sam against Charles Cross. What do you think that matchup's going to look like?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. When I was on the field yesterday, it's like looking in the mirror thing. But I did see Sam on both sides yesterday, and he set the single season school sack record. It was 2 weeks ago, and he has not had a sack since. So he's having a monster year, but he's kind of in one of those stretches right now where he's maybe not necessarily getting the numbers, and he was getting pressure yesterday, but maybe not in the way that you expect the guy who has 10.5 sacks to kind of be impacting Vanderbilt. I think that was kind of the whole theme yesterday, is you expected everybody to go off because it was Vanderbilt, and nobody went off, which was mind-boggling for a lot of reasons. But I think that matchup with Charles Cross, I think they're gonna have to do that, but there's also that part of me that thinks you might want to put him on the weaker link and let him kind of eat a little bit. But Sam has had a monster year, not just as a pass rusher, but he's set the edge pretty well. He's pretty stout, against the run. He is a pretty big dude these days. But that matchup with Charles Cross is going to be really interesting, because you've got, Cross is possibly a first round pick, and Sam Williams is going to test like a first round pick. He's going to run a 4.5 or something like that. So you've got potentially, 2 first round talents.
I think one of those guys that you see from the combine that the projections just go up.
Yeah, no, he's going to be one of those guys who he is going to be a combine superstar for sure. I think it's a big game for both of those guys, and that's not something that you usually focus on with looking at the offensive line, but I think that might be the best matchup of the night.
Yeah. I think that's interesting that one thing you said there about moving him on the other side. I mean, the recipe is there. If Ole Miss goes back and watches that Alabama film, I mean, they took Will Anderson and just put him on Scott Lashley at right tackle, and he had 4 sacks of the 7 Alabama sacks, and it's no surprise. I mean, listen, I know there's a lot of pride, and the first round guy wanting to face the first round guy, but hey, sometimes if your advantage is just tossing him on the other side and letting him take advantage of a weaker link, that's what you got to do. And that's what I'm kind of looking to see what Ole Miss does in that aspect, because, if you want to get away from Charles Cross as much as possible, I mean, there's a reason he's projected where he is. And you take out your pride a little bit and you say, you know what, go on the right tackle, Scott Lashley, and make his day, a horrible one, which is what Alabama did. I don't think, Sam is quite as good as Will Anderson. And I think Will Anderson is a likely, top 3 pick in the NFL. So that's not saying much. But the formula is there. The film is there to see how you can use him, despite, Charles Cross being lined up.
Yeah. Do you think Alabama may have had an evaluation laying around on Scott Lashley? You think they might have had
They might
a
have.
preformed opinion on that matchup before the game?
Yeah, I think Nick Saban looked back and said, you know what, there was a reason we benched Scott Lashley throughout his time at Alabama. Maybe we should attack him. But Parrish, I kind of wanted to get your thoughts on this because it's been talked about a little bit with some of the media guys here at MSU. I think Sam and Charles going at it is one example, but does it feel like this is one of those egg bowls for first time in a while where there's genuinely just a lot of potential NFL talent on both sides?
Well, I think there is, and certainly, it's not just look, State and Ole Miss. They have guys drafted. Most years you're going to have somebody drafted, um, but it's not every year that you have guys who are rated as highly as Matt Corral, as Charles Cross, as some guys like this. There's a lot of talent on the field. I wanted to ask you about Martin Emerson. Has he had the kind of year that his August projections would indicate? It seems like teams haven't been so bothered in throwing at him this year.
Right. It's so hard to evaluate his season just because of you don't hear his name come up a lot.
Yeah.
He's the one that had the questionable holding call on that last, Arkansas game-winning drive. And he had a pass interference late in that game against Tennessee State. And those have kind of been like the two plays that I even remember Martin Emerson being part of because teams just don't throw his way. I mean, he's not getting interceptions, he's not getting past breakups, and it's because teams just aren't looking his way. And you can look at all the grades and stuff on Pro Football Focus, and they're good for him because those can kind of break down, looking past the past breakups and the interceptions on what he's doing. He has, I think, lived up to a lot of the hype. There were questions of whether he was, some draft boards had him as a first round pick. A lot has him at a second round pick. I think he leans more in that second round pick territory. Just in terms of the size and stuff like that. I don't think he's quite a first round pick. And obviously, a lot of the combine numbers will dictate that as well. But in terms of a player that's been really quiet, that's usually good. I mean, I kind of think back to Richard Sherman after he had that big play with Crabtree, and he went on his rant with Aaron Andrews. After that, teams didn't really look his way, and you stopped hearing those rants because his name just wasn't coming up a whole lot. And I think you're kind of seeing that with Martin Emerson right now. And it seems like we talk about Emmanuel Forbes a lot because he's the one that's being forced to get those interceptions and those pass breakups because teams are forced to go his way.
And he's been doing it. He's played well. Hey, all right, guys. And Steph, I want to start with you because I still think that Will Rogers is the underdog in this conversation. But who has the best quarterback in this game? Make a case, Steph, for Will Rogers.
Well, I think in terms of 10 years from now, when they're both out of college, I think Matt Corral will be having the better NFL career because I don't know how much of an NFL career there is for Will Rogers. But I think the case I will make for Will Rogers is that his numbers, people downplay them because he's got, 200 more passing attempts than the next highest guy in Bryce Young in the SEC. I don't think he's a system guy. I think the system fits him because he's a good passer, an accurate passer, doesn't take those shots downfield that maybe a Corral does. But he utilizes that short game in a way that Corral probably utilizes the running game. So I think there's similarities and differences to the way those offenses work. But I think, saying that just because he throws a lot, he has these numbers that I don't think is necessarily fair. I mean, he still has a high completion percentage. He's still building up those yards. He's not throwing interceptions, which I think is one of the more fascinating things. I mean, you throw it that much, you would think he would have a few more interceptions than he does. Do I think he's more talented than Matt Corral? No, I don't think so. But I will say that I think he's had a really good season to where the competition between the two of them of who's the best player in Mississippi is a valid conversation to have. And I know, what's tough with Corral is I know a lot of people will say, well, he's been injured and that kind of skews everything. Well, it's hard to, you can't take away something from Will Rogers just because the other guy's been hurt, just because, it's not Will Rogers' fault that he's been healthy. It's hard. It's really hard to say which one of them has been better this year because I think they've both been so good. And I think, like you said, I think Will Rogers has kind of embraced that underdog mentality, and he knows that, Corral is going to be the one getting a lot of the attention going into this game. But there's been a lot of conversation about Will Rogers, especially since that Auburn game and the numbers he's put up. I think people are kind of starting to notice the way he's grown. I think I think Matt has been the better quarterback this year and has been the better overall player this year. But I think it's a really close 1A to say that Will Rogers is the next guy up there.
Well, I'll tell you what, I think the system quarterback argument, I think Will Rogers would be successful in other systems, not all systems, but in other systems. I think he's a really good fit in this system. Look, there are some numbers, there are some stats where I look at that and say, he throws it all the time. Touchdown passes applies to that, but so do the interceptions, as you point out. But no matter how many times you throw it, the completion percentage is what the completion percentage is. And at 75, almost 76%, I don't know how it changed after yesterday, probably got better. That's pretty stout to complete it that many times. You know, as Rick Stansberry once said, it's hard to do that against air. You know, the former Mississippi State basketball coach. I know you're studying your history there, Steph. That's who that is. After some guy from Vanderbilt, I believe, went 8 for 10 against him from 3-point range in the SEC tournament. It's hard to do that against air. But anyway, I think he's great in that system. I think he's extremely accurate, and that's why every one of those short passes is like a handoff and gets those very talented running backs involved and gets them in space and gets them ahead of steam. They're good players. They impact games, and they do that because they have a quarterback that gets them the ball. Now, talk to me, Michael, about Matt Corral, and what have you seen?
It's crazy that this is a conversation because, you know, like a few months ago, who would have thought that this would have been a serious conversation, just kind of given where things were. But if you ask me who is playing better right now, it's Will Rogers. And that's not because of anything Matt's done, just Will Rogers is playing really, really well. And Matt has kind of, you know, I think everybody was expecting, because of, you know, the gaudy numbers that he put up last year, that he was just going to repeat that again. But I think part of it is like they're playing a little bit differently because they're winning games. They don't have to be doing a lot of the things that they did last year that is forcing Matt to, you know, make those sorts of throws. I've said this a few times. You know, I don't know how the Heisman thing is going to go in terms of who's going to be a finalist and all that stuff, but I really do think Matt Corral is the most important player to his team in college football. And, you know, the numbers are great. He's got, I think, 19 touchdowns and 3 picks now. He's got 10 rushing touchdowns, 500 yards. All that stuff is great. But I think it's the way that he just sort of is like, he orchestrates that offense. Without him, that offense does not work. It just, you know, I think Luke Allmeyer and Kincaid Dent might end up being really nice players, but you throw them in there and that offense does not look anything like it does. And Lane has kind of said as much, just how important, you know, Matt is to just getting everything right and being able to do all the things they do. And, you know, we saw when Matt was a little bit less mobile because of the ankle, the running game for them wasn't working as well, because the running game's at its best when he is a threat in that department. And I think he's kind of getting a little bit more back there. And so when he's good, it opens things up for Ely and for Parrish and for Snoop Connor and all those guys, and it makes things easier on the offensive line. You know, he's having a great year. I think they're winning games, and I think that's, you know, that's kind of the key here. I don't, you know, he's never really struck me as a guy who really cares if he throws, you know, 3 picks and they win, or if they throws 5 touchdowns and they lose. You know, after the game last night, it was really funny. You know, Lane was like, yeah, I wasn't sure if I wanted to, you know, grill them. And he said he walked in and Matt Corral was already doing that and said, don't you dare go out and have fun tonight. Like, we played like crap. And if we do that again, we're going to get blown out by Mississippi State. And so I just think the physical skills are amazing, but I think just his presence for that team, the whole thing goes because of him. So, I mean, if you, like I said, for who's playing right now, there's not many quarterbacks playing better than Will Rogers anywhere right now, other than, you know, CJ Stroud and Bryce Young, who had insane days yesterday. But you know, when Matt Corral is at his best, he's pretty special, and just his ability to kind of make plays when Ole Miss really needs them. If he needs to take off and run, it always seems like he picks up the first down. He just kind of has that it factor. He's just sort of that dude. And Will Rogers is amazing. I don't know who's going to end up winning the Carly Trophy, but I think Matt Corral is. If you were asking me who I'd rather have in the Egg Bowl as my quarterback, I think it's pretty hard to pick against Matt Corral just because he's got the skill, but he's got the moxie too.
I'll tell you what, I do agree that no player in college football means more to his team than Matt Corral means to Ole Miss right now. And what has been interesting about Matt, this was the pre-injury Matt. I think people are waiting to see him round into form. And I really think, as you mentioned, that he's a lot closer to that than he was. But the running game has been great for Ole Miss. There's a deep running backs room. Henry Parrish, Yerion Ely, Snoop Connor, all have had big, impactful games at times. And then there have been times when that running game has vanished. And one of those was the first half against Arkansas. Okay. And there was some time in the Tennessee game, same thing. But Arkansas in particular, that game ended up 52-51. There was back and forth. But in the first half, it seemed like Arkansas was scoring with less effort. Ole Miss was having to work really hard to get those touchdowns in the first half, and that running game wasn't really working then, but Matt Corral was, and he put that offense on his back with the run game and made strong physical runs where he used his vision and he cut, and then he slid at the last minute. He did all those things. So anyway, I think that's what helps him stand out above Will Rogers in this conversation, is that Rogers is outstanding with his accuracy and has been with his decisions in the second half of the season, all of those things. But watching Will Rogers run, I fear for Will Rogers. He leaves the pocket. It's kind of scary. And there are so many other things that you can do when your quarterback does two things, does more than make the accurate throw. And certainly Corral has done that and has made the deep throws as well. Folks, that'll wrap us up for this edition of Justify Your Existence. We'll have the picks later in the week. Hey, we may even have Michael Katz's recipe for what he calls stuffing and I call dressing. Looks really good on Twitter. Thanks for being with us, folks. Catch all of our coverage this week. It's going to be a busy week. Catch us at djournal.com. And we're in those Facebook groups as well. Come join us.